Well, this morning we're continuing our focus on Prasa and all of its various problems. It follows the scathing report by the Zondo Commission, which in essence presents the railway agency as having gone off the rails completely. Now, an investigation by a team of well-known AmaBhungane investigative journalists has found, listen to this, that a group of security personnel have been embedded in Prasa's security division, making them very influential in determining the agency's security budget. This particular group has also been traced to President Ramaphosa's CR17 campaign. So let's bring in AmaBhungane investigative journalist Tebogo Tshwane, part of the investigation. Tebogo, good to have you on eNCA. It's always so good to have you joining us on the channel. Let's start first of all with the security guards, the embedding of this. Where did this come from? What's the significance?
Well, the significance of the story that AmaBhungane published, I think about a month or two ago, was that Prasa finds itself at a time where much of its infrastructure has been stolen due to the fact that illegal security contracts, historical contracts that were found in former Public Protector Thuli Madonsela's derailed report were cancelled without any proper mechanism to have a contingency plan in place in order to secure the railway line. And the reason why those initial contracts were cancelled was because people who were not working in the best interest of the organization in terms of awarding security contracts at the time facilitated and oversaw these irregular transactions towards these specific security companies. And it led then Prasa in a position where much of its railway line was being secured by security companies who did not necessarily have to be there. So we were then just looking at the fact that, are we seeing the same patterns repeating themselves in the present-day Prasa? Because the people who are now placed in quite significant positions within security, a very significant department in the operations of the institution, have a lot of question marks on them. And you would assume that in the so-called new dawn, there would be a lot more scrutiny and a lot more sort of caution in appointing individuals in such key roles, especially given the devastating consequences of not doing so.
And it's important as well that we understand who is involved in budgets, even at this level, isn't it, Tebogo? Because I see reports from a few days ago, Prasa telling Parliament it must shift 7.5 billion rand to fix trains as well. I see that on News 24. And when you start breaking that down, it's money going to new staffing up, personnel numbers up from 2,000 back in 2020 to now 4,922, and then the refurbishment of the actual train carts and the infrastructure. So 7.5 billion rand is exactly why we need to be a lot more clear on who's getting this money, how they're getting it, and where did they get it from. I just want to ask about the CR17 campaign, though. Take me down the rabbit hole here, because when we talk about state capture, I'm sure you'll agree, Tebogo, it can get difficult to try and tie this in. So tie this in for me, if you can, to the CR17 campaign.
So a lot of the individuals that were placed in security, especially in the part that we looked at, were people that worked at the CR17 campaign. The thing that actually made us start looking at the issues into Prasa and the security department in particular was the fact that the acting head of security at the moment was someone that was reportedly that was reported to have been behind the leak into the emails and the communication that then comes out of the CR17 campaign, in which we get to understand who was putting money into the internal ANC campaign race for President Cyril Ramaphosa in 2017. Linked to him, or rather the way in which he comes into Prasa and the way in which the former head of security that was in his place before he passed away in August comes into Prasa left a lot to be desired in terms of process. There were a lot of allegations from several people that we spoke to about ministerial interference in appointing these individuals into Prasa, and questions about whether or not the former head of security, who was appointed at the time to at a time when Prasa needed to put together a security strategy so that in order to fulfill one of the orders of the High Court in Cape Town that said that Prasa actually did not act correctly in cancelling the security contracts prior. May have been pushed out in order to make room for these individuals to come into Prasa. And then you have the Red Ants contract that the Sunday Times reports on, and you find that these two individuals were also quite instrumental in ensuring that Red Ants contract that Prasa awards that contract to the Red Ants, and there are questions about the procurement process that was followed with regards to that and how much that contract is then, and the value of that contract is. And all these people are linked or can be sort of traced to the CR17 campaign, which is quite disheartening, in the same way as, Zondo mentions in his report that a lot, the expectation from a new dawn, Cyril Ramaphosa-led government is quite markedly different from what people expected from the period that we like to term state capture and limit to President Jacob Zuma's term, because Ramaphosa runs on anti-corruption, stabilization, rebuilding ticket. And this is sort of the rhetoric that we have coming through in the years post-2017 and I guess post-2018 when he becomes president. And yet we have all these sort of questionable appointments taking place in Prasa, in particular in this regard, under his watch, and there doesn't seem to be any action or any comment coming from him as well in terms of what does this mean and what does he think of it, and does he think that there's something something that he needs to act on.
And the Chief Justice also even slamming, you mentioned the former President Jacob Zuma, also Cyril Ramaphosa, Tebogo, as I say goodbye to you, for not supporting Prasa's board against fighting corruption as well. And this is why it's so important we have these discussions, also to stay on top of what came out of this report. You can't just read it word for word. You need to understand the context as to how it all fits together. And Tebogo, congratulations to you and AmaBhungane on this. And I'm sure we'll talk again. Tebogo Tshwane, AmaBhungane investigative journalist. Incredible work looping it all together for us off the back of the final volume of the state capture inquiry. 22 after 7.